moderate this webinar today. And we believe that everyone, everywhere, has the right to education and the opportunity it brings, which is why today we'd like to discuss the topic of driving equity and quality in education through technology. We have an exciting lineup of 10 experts from around the world, and we promise an interesting mix of presentations, case studies, and panel discussions as part of today's agenda. As you can see, the agenda is broadly split into two sessions. After the opening statements, we will dedicate around 40 minutes to the topic of distance learning and education continuity. And after that, in session 2, we will focus on the topic of ICT innovation for inclusive learning. But let's start with the opening statements by our esteemed guests from UNESCO, GSMA, and Huawei. First of all, it's my privilege to introduce you to Ms. Stefania Giannini. Ms. Giannini is UNESCO's Assistant Director General for Education. In other words, she is the top United Nations official in the field of education. Welcome, Ms. Giannini.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. And thank you very much for this initiative. It's really a true evidence, a true testament to your company's commitment to education as every nation's greatest wealth. And this is very much important in current times, more than ever. The title of this webinar strikes two keywords that I'd like to recall you, and that, in my opinion, they are really at the heart of sustainable development goal on education: equity and quality. Related to this, I would add inclusion, which is the theme of UNESCO's Global Education Monitoring Report, being launched today in a few minutes on another webinar platform. This report identifies an exacerbation and amplification of exclusion during the COVID-19 pandemic, and it estimates that about 40% of low and lower middle income countries have not been able to support disadvantaged learners during school shutdowns. This is very much something to reflect on. And this comes as almost 260 million children and youth were already out of school, while 6 out of 10 in school were not learning the basics. This is data clearly very well known from UNESCO statistics before the COVID-19 crisis. From the outset of the pandemic, UNESCO was warned that schools closures could increase learning inequalities. This was our first alert to all education communities, governments, and all people in the world who are keen to relaunch the role of education in society. Almost overnight, learning went online, but only half the world's population has access to the internet. This is what we know. Countries have demonstrated enormous resourcefulness and commitment to ensure learning continuity through high and low tech means. But the universal scale of this crisis, the very much first universal crisis, with school closures affecting 1.6 billion students in more than 180 countries, an unprecedented situation in the history, this universal scale of the crisis requires a global response, one characterized by partnerships, a new kind of cooperation, and solidarity. This was the impetus of establishing the Global Education Coalition that now counts on 130 partners, from the UN system, our sister agencies, to technology companies, foundations, no-profits, civil society, and media networks. The aim is clear: to match expertise, talent, resources to support countries with inclusive learning solutions that will not only serve now, but beyond the crisis. I thank Huawei for joining the coalition and for contributing tangibly, starting in Senegal. This has shown that in a short space of time, it's possible to lead rapid transformation thanks to an integrated approach that includes connectivity, activated learning platforms or building new ones, teacher training, digitalizing curriculum, developing educational resources, and ensuring capability and capacity building of national stakeholders. I know your ambition doesn't stop here, as our ambition doesn't stop here. Let me say like this. We are in the same process with the same mission. And I welcome the Tech for All's work to drive inclusive education at all levels. Tech for All is in line with the Global Education Coalition aim to keep children and youth with the digital skills required for an increasingly digitalized economies and societies, here now and in the near future. We are calling this initiative the Global Skills Academy. The international community has committed for universal education and lifelong learning opportunities by 2030. This is one of the first and important objective of 2030 agenda as a whole. The prospect of an economic recession, which is already here and now, and cuts in education and aid budgets could have a dramatic impact, especially for the most marginalized and vulnerable population. We have to clarify this point. We have to dramatize this message, as the situation will become really very much dramatic in case we will not be able to protect and promote education as a real priority in the near future. Education definitely needs more resources, not less, precisely to reach those furthest behind, precisely to integrate technology into learning and to improve health and safety. They are not two competing objectives, health and education. They are part of the same process of building a more inclusive, resilient, and just society. We cannot envision the future without a drive to universalize connectivity and ensure that all teachers and students gain the digital skills that every society now requires clearly. Governments are already planning the future along the lines of hybrid learning models and systems that combine traditional face-to-face and online learning and teaching processes. Digital technology has the potential to make learning more fluid, more natural somehow, to expand access, to improve quality and supportive, effective learning pathways through more personalized and interactive pedagogies. Let me underline our conviction that technology can never substitute for teachers. It can enhance their practice, provided they are involved in developing tools and benefit from the right professional development. I don't see robots replacing teachers in the classroom. I see AI and technology tools to support teachers' role in the near future. The digital revolution will only carry its true transformative potential when it is inclusive. And here governments, the technology community, the private sector as well, teachers and parents, of course, all have to be on board. I once again welcome Huawei's commitment and trust. This will be a long-term partnership to make education systems more inclusive and better prepared to face an uncertain and interconnected future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Giannini. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today on a very busy day. And thank you for reiterating the message that we all need to work together to make education systems more inclusive. Now we move on to Ms. Stephanie Lynch-Habib, Chief Marketing Officer at GSMA.
Thank you, Ivo, and hello, everyone. It's a true pleasure to be here with you all today. The topic of education is close to my heart and many, and of course, an area of focus for the GSMA and the global mobile industry. This year, COVID-19 has closed schools for millions of students worldwide. The UN recently reported that 166 countries have closed their schools and universities to limit the spread of COVID-19. 1.5 billion children and young people are affected, representing 87% of the global enrolled population. 87%. Think about that. And what's even more concerning is that the pandemic disproportionately threatens low and middle income countries, as school closures bring with them high socioeconomic costs, particularly for marginalized children. And so, in addition to interrupted learning, children and young people are also suffering. Poor nutrition when they depend on free school meals, difficulties with distance learning and homeschooling as parents are unprepared, high economic costs where parents can't work as they have to take care of their children, worsened healthcare as doctors and nurses leave work due to childcare responsibilities, a higher probability of dropping out of school, increased exposure to violence for vulnerable children, and social isolation. Education is moving from a knowledge transfer model to a collaborative model that helps keep people around the world increasing their knowledge and develop their skills needed to succeed in the learning society. More than ever before, the interruption in learning due to COVID-19 highlights the urgent need to create new sustainable learning models. There are opportunities for new mobile solutions, for EdTech, which is set to be worth £128 billion by 2021 globally. The challenges of COVID had boosted the adoption of EdTech, and many lessons have been learned this year in low and middle income countries, adapting services to address the new needs of users, and responding to the impacts of the global pandemic by evolving business and key partnerships. The GSMA works with 3 EdTech startups, Ruang Guru in Indonesia, Prep Class in Nigeria, and Aniza Education in the Côte d'Ivoire. All 3 are grantees of the GSMA Innovation Fund, and we have been working with them and mentoring them since 2017 and 2018. And 2020 has brought unexpected challenges. With this sudden increase in free users comes the need for many more online sessions, and in turn, the challenge on how to retain those users once the service is no longer free. Of course, optimal quality is one method of demonstrating true value. COVID-19 has accelerated Africa's pace in accepting EdTech and catalyzed adoption. While nothing truly can replace the experience of traditional education, digital education can step in where circumstances are more challenging, such as having to stay at home. Another challenge for users can be the sudden increase in cost, as they need mobile packages that allow them to join class for 4 hours a day, 5 days a week. And this is where mobile operators become even more relevant. Ruang Guru has partnered with 5 MNOs in Indonesia. Max Cuvelier, our head of Mobile for Development, puts it really well. He says entrepreneurs are opening digital schools. What mobile operators are doing is paying for the bus for the students to go to this digital school by making the data either free or cheaper. Of course, the role of parents is crucial for EdTech to work. They must support learning and monitor learning to make sure the child only uses the phone for digital education. And equally, teachers must be vetted to protect the students. In the Côte d'Ivoire, Aniza has a very elaborate interviewing process, ensuring quality and safety. Digital learning models bring with them opportunities for private-public partnerships by working with government, specifically the Ministry of Education. As well as other types of partnerships, Ruang Guru has partnered with FMCGs who pay for advertising, and Prep Class has signed an MOU with one of the largest banks of Nigeria. Of course, understanding the market is ultimately key to offering a successful EdTech solution. The infrastructure, complexity in the target market, average household economics, and potential relationships with national MNOs. As mobile technology is penetrating low and middle income countries at a fast pace, EdTech has the potential to give millions of students the opportunity to learn in the remotest parts of the world, with limited or no access to schools. Our vision at the GSMA is to unlock the full power of connectivity so that people, industry, and society thrive. EdTech can help sustainably empower young generations, bridge gender gaps, and facilitate their integration into the workforce. And that's what I call thriving. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lynch Habib, for a wonderful story. Really love GSMA's efforts to use connectivity to help millions of people thrive. Really great story. Thank you very much. And now, up next, please allow me to introduce you to Deputy Chairman at Huawei and one of the key minds behind the Tech for All initiative, Mr. Ken Hu.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Here, I would like to talk about the digital divide in education and how we can deal with it. We all know that the digital technology has a huge impact on education, but not everyone has equal access to these benefits. The pandemic has made this very clear. School closures have disrupted the education of more than 1.5 billion students around the world. Some communities were able to react quickly, using strong digital infrastructure and affordable devices to keep children safe and in class. These communities are fortunate. However, 50% of the world's population still has no internet access, and devices are not affordable in many countries. Even if people have devices in those countries, they don't have the digital skills to use them. The fact is, we have a lack of digital inclusion in education, and the gap is increasing because technology is changing so fast. So what can we do? To be honest, promoting equal access to good education is a big challenge, but it is not impossible. We have the tools and the resources needed, but we have to put them to work. As a technology company, Huawei wants to help with connectivity, applications, and skills. Last year, we launched an initiative called Tech for All. The goal of this initiative is to make sure that every person can benefit from digital technology, and that every person has a place in the digital world. Education is one of the 4 focuses of this program. We want to help make quality education available everywhere, anytime, and to everyone. We focus on 2 areas: developing digital skills and connecting schools. Let me give you more details. To develop digital skills, we mostly work with young adults in remote communities to create better opportunities. We do this in several ways. Like the mobile learning truck, you can see it right here. This is in Kenya, and we call it the DigiTruck. Working with local partners, we drive the truck around to different villages where we teach basic digital skills like searching for information on the internet. They were never taught this before, and we hope that these new skills can help them find new opportunities in their lives. We're going to expand this program to 5 more countries over the next 2 years, including France and Philippines. We're also working to connect the schools. This includes providing internet connectivity, digital devices, educational content, and digital training for teachers and students in remote communities. Let me show you why. Back in February, I visited a primary school in Johannesburg. The kids are very bright and eager to learn. and the teachers are passionate about their work. But the school has very limited resources. As you can see here, they have a computer lab, but it's basically a storage closet. They don't use any of it, not because they don't want to, but because they don't have anyone to teach computer classes, and they don't have internet access in the school. These children will grow up unconnected from the digital world, which will have a huge impact on their lives. There are many schools like this in many countries around the world, and we can make a big difference with some simple steps. In South Africa, we started a project called DigiSchool. We partnered with a local telecom carrier, RAIN, and a local non-profit organization called Click Foundation. This is how we do it. Huawei provides network equipment, smart tablets, and operational support. RAIN provides free network services. Click Foundation provides content and teaching resources. Very soon, the kids in this school will be set up for e-learning, starting with English classes. Over the next year, our goal is to connect 100 primary schools in South Africa. We're working with 12 right now. If we reach our goal, we can bring new opportunities to more than 50,000 young kids. And that's only one project in one country. The world is hurting right now, but this pandemic is also a good opportunity to push for change. We cannot solve all education challenges overnight, but if we can work together, we can do more. Platforms like the UNESCO Global Education Coalition and Huawei's Tech for All are a great way to coordinate efforts and resources around the world. Everyone brings a unique skill or resource to the table. I hope today's discussion can help us explore these topics more. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ken Hu. I love the emphasis on having to work together, because together we can achieve more and make education more inclusive and accessible to everyone. Great message. Now let's move on to our session on distance learning for education continuity. As part of this session, we will have two very interesting presentations and a panel discussion towards the end. And the first presentation is from Mr. Boren Chakroun. Mr. Boren Chakroun is Director of Policies and the Lifelong Learning Systems Division at UNESCO. Mr. Chakroun will speak to us about the COVID-19 Global Education Coalition and how UNESCO anticipates the challenges that COVID-19 represents to students, teaching staff, and communities. Welcome, Boren.
Good morning, good afternoon to all the participants. It's my pleasure to present today to you a global overview regarding the actions to ensure continuity of learning and to leave no one behind. I would like to start my presentation by sharing a bit what happened in the last probably few weeks as we were heading to an unprecedented outbreak. As you have been looking at different maps that we, as UNESCO, we have been presenting, and one of the challenge that we have seen was the scale of the school closure all over the world. Obviously, this is something that we have identified as a global, although it affected countries in different ways. One important factor is the claim or the expectation that the learning will move online. this is something that we, of course, identified, but we have seen that in many households, access to internet was not a reality, including in OECD countries, for example, as you see here. So there are differences across countries and across regions. We also have seen that there are challenges in terms of the teacher's capacity to engage in distance learning and in offering effective teaching and learning processes online. This is the situation in OECD countries, but the situation is also quite important to highlight in other regions.
It would be great if you could, Boren, it'd be great if you could put the presentation on presentation mode, because I think it's slightly easier for people to see the.
Okay, I'm trying to get.
The icon on the bottom right, I think, does it next to 69%. Oh. View. Oh, and then if you go to the left, there's a little presentation icon that shows it to where your cursor is now. Perfect.
Sorry for that. So I was saying that the situation is also critical for teachers. And when we look, for example, in region like in Africa, where, of course, the challenges are the highest, we can see, for example, that 50% of the secondary teachers have not received the minimum teaching that is required at the national level. And in most cases, what they have received does not include ICT skills. So the message here is that in many contexts, the reality of online learning is not accessible to a large number of learners. And that, as some of the speakers highlighted in the beginning, we have a challenge for all of us, how to ensure that people have connectivity and have access to an effective teaching and learning. So this is what happened, and obviously this is something that has triggered national policy actions, regional and international. And what has changed is that we have noted that in many countries and in many regions, there are different responses that have been adopted, different modalities that have been adopted, and in most cases, those modalities are a mix of high-tech solutions, low-tech solutions, meaning access in maybe asynchronous way, or no-tech solutions, for example, access to radio and TV, or to learning materials. So countries have been trying to respond in different ways, but in most cases, they have been trying to have a mix of strategies. And in our research and survey that we have conducted, we have seen that out of the countries that we have surveyed, around 82 have adopted TV and radio. They have 75% have adopted and used existing national online platform. Around 62% have used free and open online resources. And in more than 50%, countries have been trying to set up new national online platforms. But we have also noted that there are challenges in ensuring the management and learning, but also challenges in terms of supporting health and well-being of the learners. And we have seen some high levels of unpreparedness of parents, for example, disrupted school calendar, of course, economic costs, and particularly for the less privileged population. But there are also challenges in terms of health and well-being. As I mentioned, it's about the socio-emotional impact. it's also social isolation of learners, and in some cases, access to nutrition. So we need to think not only about the learning, but also about the health and well-being of the learners, the parents, the teachers, and other populations. In this context, what we are doing as UNESCO, but also as an international community, we have launched a global education coalition to support member states and to act to synergize initiatives to leave no one behind. This is a coalition that tries to protect the right to education in the disruption period, and to ensure that the recovery phase and that going forward we can build better and back the education systems and ensure the resilience and reimagining education as we move forward. So this is what the Global Education Coalition has been set for, and this is a coalition that involves a large number of partners, from United Nations organization to private companies like Huawei to non-profit organization, media, network, and academia. And this diversity of the membership shows the importance of having multi-stakeholders action and not focusing only on one actor. And this is about collaboration and engagement, of course. What the Global Education Coalition is trying to do, first of all, is trying to ensure equity and inclusion as the major goal for its action. It's about supporting the mix of strategy that I referred to earlier. It's about training of teachers. It's about creating content and adjusting to the needs of the learners. It's about connecting learners and schools, because, as I mentioned earlier, the challenge has been a major for many of the population, and connecting learners and school to online learning is one of the challenges. But it's also about developing local ecosystems and not a global supermarket of education. What we are trying to do is to empower national stakeholders to develop local content that is aligned to the national needs. But of course, that taps and uses the resources available on at the international level. It's about also monitoring the learning outcomes and ensuring that the learning losses are addressed and that there is an appropriate response to those challenges. What we are trying to do is, as I said earlier, is to adopt and take into account both the different levels of connectivity and ensure continuity of learning in different technology stages. For no-tech solutions, we have been working with partners to produce learning materials and share them. For low-tech solutions, we have been trying to use resources, for example, using mobile phones. And for the full connectivity, we have been working to operate learning platform, train teachers, and ensure synchronous learning processes that can support continuity of learning. We are also creating, and ADG Giannini referred to the Global Skills Academy. We are also launching a Global Teacher Campus to ensure the training of teachers in terms of ICT in education skills, but also in terms of pedagogies, acting at a global level, at regional, and at country-specific level. And in this, we are tapping on the resources of a large number of partners that I mentioned earlier, among them Huawei, of course. Maybe going forward, what will change? First of all, we think that we have to take into account 5 C's and 5 steps that we have to consider. One is, of course, coping with the continuity of learning after closing the schools. It's about coming back and reopening schools and reopening safely those schools and prioritizing most marginalized population. It's about building resilience and so consolidating. But we think that it's a right moment, an opportunity to reimagine education and shape new, equitable, and quality education and lifelong learning opportunities for all. That's what the Sustainable Development Goal 4 is set up. And we think that it's very important that we act together to accelerate pace, to address these new challenges, and to reimagine the way we would like to address the challenges of education system. Thank you very much. And I'm very happy to join the panel afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Boren. That was very interesting. And I would definitely like to build on your vision and your plans for the immediate and the long-term response to the current situation in our panel discussion later on. Thank you very much. But before we go on to the panel, I am pleased to introduce to you Mr. Zhu Xiaofei. Mr. Zhu is Deputy Director for China's Ministry of Education Expert Advisory Group of Online Education for International Platforms and Course Developments. Mr. Zhu has kindly recorded a presentation for us.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to be invited by Huawei to join this global webinar on higher education. Today, I would like to talk about practice and experience of China's online higher education during the COVID-19 in 2020. In my talk, I will talk about 5 points: the online education actions of Chinese government, universities, and society during COVID-19 this year, change of teaching and learning forms through online education, typical online education models and methods in Chinese universities. Then I will introduce experiences of China's online higher education. Finally, I give my conclusion. In early 2020, the COVID-19 virus have spread over the world and China. The steps of the life and the work of billions of people were disturbed. In China, over 17.7 million of students could only stay in home but not come back to the universities for learning in time. This event brought the bigger influences and challenges to the universities in China. The problem is, how can universities open the classes in the spring semester in time? Very quickly, the Chinese government and the universities launched actions. The MOE, Ministry of Education, announced the guideline of online education in anti-pandemic on February 4th, 2020. They call university teaching and learning never stop by means of online education in the cloud. Very quickly, more than 1,400 universities launched the online classes of the spring semester in time through 3 batches during February to March 2020. More than 1 million staffs and faculties have opened 12 million online courses times, and 2.3 billion person times of students in the university. They go from home everywhere into the cloud for online learning. IT and online education companies and MOOC societies provide the support for the educational actions. More than 110 online education companies have provided MOOC platforms, online classroom platforms, online meeting platforms, and over 40,000 online courses freely to the university. Among them, 37 online education platforms or tools are recommended by Ministry of Education. These online platforms in cloud has played important roles in these online education actions. More than 18 million staffs and students have used these platforms and tools for online teaching, learning, interaction, and discussion. Moreover, many MOOC associations and unions have coordinated qualified MOOCs and online teaching resources to support the university's activities. Many training programs for teachers' adaptability to online teaching have organized by the MOOC associations. Here is so the platforms used by the university. Online education changed the teaching and learning forms. Teaching is changed. The roles of teachers are changed from lecturers into ushers and coaches. The teachers are active to explore and to use the new online teaching methods and to organize the online classes and discussion. Learning is changed. The roles of students are changed from listeners to actors and players. The students are active and excited to engage in the online classes and learning activities in cloud. Here shows the story of students. They describe their situation of online learning. Universities are also changed. The roles of universities are changed from managers into coordinators and supporters. The universities changed the way to manage the teaching activities by means of online monitoring, real-time feedback, big data analysis, and quality assurance. This picture shows that the member of a teaching advisory committee, they monitor the situation of the online classes. Then I will introduce the typical online education models and methods this time. So generally say, so there are 4 basic online teaching models, including MOOCs and SPOOCs, direct seeding, recorded video, and distance supervision. By means of MOOC platforms, online classroom platforms, online meeting systems, online e-learning tools, online laboratories, and virtual simulated experiment software. We have made investigation about these 4 types of online teaching models among 130 universities. It shows that most of the staffs and faculties, so they would like to apply MOOCs and SPOOCs and direct seeding approaches to perform their online teaching activity. Based on the basic online education models, more complicated online teaching and learning models, and the blended teaching methods are applied by the teachers in the universities, like M+1+M+N, MOOC collaborative teaching, MOOCs and SPOOCs plus online flipped classrooms, online classes, and online supervisions. And some others, they use direct seeding plus recorded video plus online supervision, and so on. Many universities concern more about the quality of online education. In fact, the effectiveness and quality of online education is quite good. So the teachers, they apply diverse online education models, methods, and platforms for online teaching and learning. And the teachers and the students, they are active to engage in the flipped and blended classrooms. The students, they are very active in class, in online discussion and online feedback. And the quality assurance has been performed based on online class monitoring, online feedback, and equivalent quality evaluation. We have made another investigation in Heilongjiang province. So we get the feedback from 256 students of the 39 universities in that province. It shows that the students, they are satisfied with the teaching quality. They are satisfied with the teacher's attitude, with the quality, with the online resource, with the online supervision and online interaction. In China, we accumulate a very successful experience of online education and MOOCs. The experience include several key points like the UGB development model means that university, government, and business collaboration development model. And we applied diverse online education models, methods, resources, and platforms. And we regard the MOOCs as key factors for online education development, learning, and using. We also combine MOOCs and online courses and the university's education reforming together. We emphasize the staff's and the students' active engagement into the online education activity. We also emphasize the standardization and quality evaluation of MOOCs and online education services. We need more technical support and education services of platforms and tools by the companies. Finally, I give my conclusion. I think COVID-19 is a crisis, but when we overcome it, we will have an opportunity to accelerate the development of online education, which has kept the continuity of university teaching activities in China this year. And we have a consensus on online education and MOOCs. It's a revolution of Internet plus education, which is very important and valuable for improving quality and fire of higher education. The UGB model is a successful approach for developing MOOCs and online education. Teachers and students are the main actors and players of online education. Currently, China has a MOOC vision and initiative to build the global education community. This year, China plans to hold the World MOOC Conference in Beijing. You are welcome to join us. Let's work together for the new era of online higher education in the world. Thank you for your attention. I do wish a successful global webinar today. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Xu. Now, let's move on to the first panel of today's webinar. For this discussion, there's no slides. We will simply ask each of the three panelists one or two questions building on their experience and expertise areas. We have three panelists. You've already heard from Boren Shakun at UNESCO, from Mr. Xu, and I'd also like to introduce you to Mr. Fall. Mr. Fall is Chief Information Officer at the Ministry of National Education in Senegal. For the first question, we will start with Mr. Shakun from UNESCO. Boren, in your presentation, you talked about the immediate response to the current situation with COVID-19. And we'd be interested to hear your views on the way forward, especially with regards to the longer term. Where do we go from here?
Thank you very much. I think this is a very critical question. I think that the point for us, are we reacting or are we proacting? And I think, and I hope UNESCO, together with other partners, will be rather proacting and trying to reimagine the future of education. And let me say that what will not change and what will change as we move forward. I think what will not change is our quest for quality, for equity and inclusion, for having the human part of our action, and that education is not only about knowing to do, but it's also about knowing to live together, knowing to be, and engaging with each other. So I think it's important to keep in mind what will remain unchanged. But what will change is also important. One very important learning that we have get from the crisis is that we have to build resilience of education systems and ensure that technology can serve everybody and that it is for all. that means we need to invest in connectivity, we need to invest in resilience building. Second, that education systems and call it the narrow circle of education stakeholders alone cannot deal with this. We need a broader collaboration and partnership that involves civil society, that involves private sector, that involves other actors like academia and networks. So it's important, this multi-stakeholders collaboration. And third, I think what is important is that we know now through the crisis that the recession, the economic impact will hit the most marginalized. It's important to protect education budget. It's important to invest in education because that's what will determine the wealth, the prosperity, and the sustainable development for all of us.
Great. Super clear. And what's your view on the role of the technology industry specifically in all of this?
I think I can see 5 dimensions that the technology has to take into account. One is access, and that means how the technology will help us to improve and enlarge access to learning opportunities. Second is quality, how technology will help us to ensure that the teaching and learning process is adapted and responds to the needs of a diversity of learners. And the report that the Global Education Monitoring Report is publishing today is speaking about the diversity. So technology should be able to help us in building quality and responding to the diversity of the learners. Third, I think, and related to the last point, is technology can help us adapt the support to build individual learning pathways. So how we will support the individualized learning pathway. Your learning needs are not the same as mine, and the technology should help cope with these learning diversity and building learning pathways. Fourth, I think it's about building probably more innovative teaching and learning processes and creating new learning environment, new ecosystem that are important. And last and not least, we would like to have a world that is solidar, that can cooperate, that can share. And technology shows that we can share. We can build common resources. We can share these common resources. And that's, for example, what the Global Education Coalition is trying to do, is to act collaboratively in solidarity and bringing resources and sharing resources at national, regional, and global level. So that's what I can see the technology can do. And obviously, the education technology industry should be seen as a partner. And partnership means sharing common goals, meaning engaging with each other, meaning tapping on the resources of each other, and meaning tapping also on the capacity to mobilize other partners. So the edtech industry should be seen as partner in an ethical manner, in take into account all the work that we are doing now in ethics, for example, in artificial intelligence, in protecting learners' data, privacy, and security. So there are some regulatory aspects that have to be taken, but I think edtech industry has to be partner and has its place in advancing this agenda of leaving no one behind.
Great. Thank you, Boen. Really interesting to hear you talk about the tech industry as a partner, especially moving forward. Really, really great message. Next, I'd like to move on to Mr. Xu. I'd be really interested to hear about some of the best practice examples from China. For example, how do students in remote areas use online learning? Do you have any interesting stories you could share with us?
Yeah. So just like I mentioned in my presentation, so I talk about, so through the this time the online education, so many education forms has been changed. Like the teaching, the teaching is changed. So the roles of teachers, changed from listener, from the lecturer to answers and coaches. So the teachers are very busy to coordinate a lot of materials and courseware and activities in the classes. So normally the teachers, they maintain 2 communication channels. One is the online classes, another one is the network groups like WeChat group or QQ group. And the students, so in the beginning, so they adjusted their status to adapt to the online learning. So they transform their roles of listeners into the actors and the players. And very quickly, some students, they do enjoy their new approach of online learning. So like one student, of our university, he described that, so I feel, I have a superpower of instant changing places. So when I open my computer, I get into my classroom. When I close my computer, so I get into my room of dormitory. Because he sits in the same room. And when I open the door of my room, I get in the restaurant. So in his home. So I do enjoy this feeling. And another student still tell another story that so when I am in the online classes, I have two special classmates. My father and my mother. So they look after me even during my class. They send me some fruit and juices during my classes. Even sometimes they sit behind me to listen the same class with me together. How can I stand on them? So this is an interesting story. And so another issue is that for us in China, the year 4, the fourth year of the bachelor students, they perform a final project. So this is a big challenge for many universities, especially for the technical university like us. So because you have to transform the form of the project into the online format. Because in early phase, in March, in April, the students they could not come to the university. They just come back to the university in May, even in beginning of June. So in such case, so the period of their projects has been performed online. So we transformed the project into several types. I summarize 5 types. One is a series theoretical project. We shifted the project task to be more mathematical and theory-oriented projects. The second one is a digital project. So we perform this digital network platform-based project. And the third one is a simulation project. So we encourage our students to apply the e-learning and network simulation software to perform their job of the final project. And another one is very special. Even the staffs, they send the package of the experiment devices into the home of university. The university, they received the package of devices. Then they make an experiment in their home, and then they send back, especially for EE, IT type majors. And also, so for some like material science and biology and chemical engineering majors, it's difficult to make experiments online. So in such case, we invent a flipped project, like flipped classroom. We invent a flipped project. So the staffs, the teachers, they designed the experiment plan with their students together. And then, because most of the staffs, they are in the campus, they are in university. They could get into the laboratories in March, since March, April, Then so they do the experiment under the supervision of their students. So we flipped the supervision relationship. Then so they follow the design of the students. They do the experiment, then send back the result to the students, then ask the student to continue to analyze the result and improve the experiment. Yeah, so in such a way, we are successful to perform all of the projects. Yeah, so in my university campus, yeah, so this year, so we have 2007 more than 2,700 students. They have performed their final project, so it was successfully. Yeah, so almost all of them, only few of them not successful. Almost all of them they are successful, and even we organized the oral defense ceremony, the meeting online. Yeah, so we organize a group of a jury committee in one room, and then but we invite the students. They defend their project. They explain their project and the results online. Yeah. So and at the same time, we have also an online monitoring system to monitor the whole procedure of the oral defense meeting. Yeah. So I think this is a very challenging new form for the educational teaching activities in the university. But we are successful to overcome this difficulty. Yeah, and this month, our final year students, they graduate in time. Yeah, so this is the story in many universities in China. Yeah, so I just give one example of my university and my campus. Yeah, thank you.
Really interesting examples, and brilliant to see what creativity and technology can do when you bring them together. Really nice. And finally, we move on to Mr. Fall from the Ministry of National Education in Senegal. Mr. Fall, we know Senegal has implemented distance learning in response to the pandemic. Can you tell us how local teachers have been adapting to this different way of learning?
Thank you very much. As we all know, the COVID-19 is spreading around the world. Since 16th of March 2020, Senegal's Ministry of Education, like those in other parts of the world, has taken steps to stop the spread of the virus. The Ministry of Education has therefore adopted an important measure called Learn at Home, which includes several specific components: online learning, television learning, community radio learning, and the conventional paper-based learning. In terms of online learning, we have adopted e-learning, a platform that the Ministry of Education has been working hard to develop over the past few years. We have also developed digital learning resources, and the efforts of digitalization actually began a few years ago. Teachers use the online education platform to continue teaching. Both teachers and students benefit from online learning resources. But like all digital solutions, this one has its limitations, as Senegal does not have a nationwide network. There are many large cities and residential areas that have network coverage, but some other areas do not have access to network, which is a challenge. One of the important principles observed by the Ministry of Education is equality. All Senegalese students have the right to quality education without exception. Therefore, the Ministry of Education has also implemented another distant education program, namely television education. We've opened an education channel that allows students who do not have internet access to continue with their education. In addition, we relied on community radio to provide education to students living in more remote areas. These students have no internet nor television, but can learn through community radio. Moreover, some people live in even more remote places and they do not even have access to electricity. I'm not just talking about not having internet or television, I'm talking about electricity. These students also have the right to education. Accordingly, the Ministry of Education has procured photocopy machines for educational and training institutions to enable them to produce printed materials for distribution to students who have no access to the internet, television, nor radio. These efforts are aimed at respecting the principle of education quality and equity. Many partners have helped us in the implementation of the Learn at Home project, notably the UNESCO-led Global Coalition for Education, which has provided facilities and equipment to the Senegalese Ministry of Education. As well as training for teachers and students. In the Global Coalition for Education, Huawei provided the Ministry of Education of Senegal with tablets, and LinkNow, a distant education platform and a solution free of charge. In fact, the cooperation between Huawei and the Ministry of Education did not just begin after the COVID-19 outbreak. The two sides began working together as early as a few years ago. Currently, the two parties are cooperating in the Smart Senegal project led by the National Information Agency. And Huawei experts are also participating in the project. The National Information Agency is also responsible for building the network for the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Information Technology. Huawei also provides a lot of technical support in this project. All this proves that Huawei has cooperated with Senegal's Ministry of Education for many years, and this cooperation has generated shared success for both sides.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mr. and Mr. Fahl, and thank you for all the speakers. This brings us to the end of session 1, and we now move on to the second session on ICT innovation for inclusive learning. As part of this second session, we again have 2 presentations, followed by a panel discussion. First, I would like to introduce to you Mr. Olivier van den Einde, CEO of Close the Gap. He started Close the Gap in 2003 with the aim to give people in developing countries access to computers. Well, Close the Gap is succeeding. With over 1 million collected computers already and more than 3 million users every week, great things are happening. Welcome, Olivier.
Thank you very much, Ivo. It's really an honor to be here today, and I've been extremely passionate and inspired by all the different angles that this webinar has shared with us this morning or this afternoon for some of us. I will talk to you as our moderator just mentioned. I'm the founder and the CEO of Close the Gap. We are a social enterprise originated from Brussels, the capital of Europe, here in Belgium. I live in Kenya those days, but because of COVID-19, unfortunately, I am stuck and in a lockdown here in Brussels as well, and so waiting to go back to Kenya. But being on this webinar, it's with all those different cultures and different origins of speakers is making me extremely feeling home again in the, I would say, this multicultural Eastern Africa society where we work. And this brings me actually already to the first slide of my presentation, which is showing kind of the footprint of the journey of Close the Gap in the last 15 years. So we have kind of collected over 1 million tech devices. So it's mostly laptops and those days mobility devices that we kind of refurbish in a state-of-the-art manner, working together with local entrepreneurial service partners in sub-Saharan Africa, where they are basically put at use in societal projects, mostly in education technology projects, but also in healthcare, agriculture, tech, and more in actually supporting aspirational entrepreneurs in sub-Saharan Africa that want to set up kind of businesses to become independent also of aid and welfare support, and to basically become a self-employed individual. And we see that technology is an enabler for that, and that way creating lots of opportunities. For sure, also COVID-19 related, the importance and the impact will probably only grow. We are looking today at 3.5 million unique users that are using our devices in kind of 25 countries, but the vast majority of our projects are in the East African community. So Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda and Burundi as well, and Ethiopia. But we have projects also in DRC, Central Africa, in South Africa, and a couple of them also in West Africa, including Senegal, Your Honor. So it was very nice to listen to your explanation about how Senegal successfully implemented the digital education schemes. To wrap up on these slides, many of you will for sure relate also the very big importance of what electronic waste is causing in certain developing countries where not always the right infrastructure and recycling schemes are available. Very important to mention is that Close the Gap since 2009 also created a take-back electronic waste program, doing that also in a best of both worlds approach where actually locally dismantling is happening, and that hazardous and complex fractions are unfortunately till today still sent back to overseas regions where capital intensive processes are available to make the recycling happen. And this brings me to this slide where I will just quickly show you what the process is all about Close the Gaps model. So we basically start in the upper top at the device use and the end of life donation. So we have an end-to-end process where we work together with big multinationals and big organizations, governments as well, that often redeploy their IT assets after 18 to, let's say, 30 months. So less than 3 years is the average of the age of our devices. So it's definitely devices that we take that are very high end still. We're not looking at old reused devices. It's really about really contemporary and modern technology. We have a proper end of life treatment program, working together with software companies to have proprietary new software installed. Obviously the transportation part, and then the end of life cycle, making it actually a kind of a circular way of working, so that basically cradle to cradle, all the devices and the raw materials at the end of the use with all those precious metals can be reused in the process for the original equipment manufacturers once they reproduce new equipment. So this leads me then to the topic of this webinar, tech and education. Obviously, I don't need to reiterate what the previous speakers have elaborated on. The importance of the access to technology is these days even more critical than it has been already in the last decades. We see the challenges for actually a large portion of the population in disadvantaged and emerging economies that are not living in the big cities and have that live in remote and rural areas, often off-grid. And this brings us actually to the case study I want to present you, is what we call the DigiTruck. And it's with Huawei that we actually developed the concept here of this DigiTruck that has been built on the African continent using actually state-of-the-art technologies to become a kind of a completely autonomously run mobile classroom. So we're looking here at a 40-feet container. It's completely fully laid down with solar panels on the roof. There is a kind of a hidden technical I would say ceiling here where the batteries are stored. And it gives us actually as much for the power as for the internet connectivity, a full off-grid usage. It's basically a mobile unit. In this case, it is definitely focusing on education stakeholders, but we also could imagine the use of this in more agriculture tech or medical tech environments. So it's a very modular and customizable way of working. So it's on a trailer. It's extremely mobile. You can move it basically just using a truck, which you kind of find anywhere in the world, and you can bring it to the most needed rural areas, even to conflict areas where building of fixed infrastructure is often a big challenge. And in that way, I would say the NGO workers, relief workers, but also local government, local school staff and teachers have a safe and an enjoyable environment where actually the children can be inspired to learn using devices in the truck, but also seeing that this truck on its own, it has already quite an attractiveness, so that it creates also a big interest for certain school leavers or youngsters that lost a little bit faith in their education journey, and that thanks to this digital program are revitalizing their energy to get back on track with their, I would say, with their own education aspirations. So the solar system, there's natural cooling. We have a flat screen as a presentation area. There is up to 20 workstations inside the truck, but there is also Wi-Fi enabling, so that actually outside learning can also be facilitated through internet connectivity, and then we can gear up close to 100 users at the same time. There is smartphones and also virtual reality headsets that we are piloting with Huawei, in this case in Kenya. It's not an isolated project in Kenya today. Close the Gap has kind of 10 DigiTrucks running on the African continent, and even one soon also in France. Where we are also working with Huawei to actually see how in this part of the world, in Central Europe, similar benefits can also be obtained by using the DigiTruck. So here you see the ones in DRC Congo. It's actually in the Kinshasa area, going up to the coast in Matadi. In Tanzania, there is another one, the Kenyan one we discussed. And then in Cape Town, South Africa, it's an interesting concept too, where it's used actually for coding classes in different townships in the Western Cape area, actually helping youngsters to actually get excited for STEM, so science, technology, engineering, and mathematics trainings. And it's all done by local partners. So that's always important for Close the Gap. So it brings me to the end of this presentation, where actually I would love to also extend a kind of a call to action and showing hopefully also the way forward, as Huawei has taken the lead in supporting Close the Gap with this initiative. I hope that this webinar can also inspire other companies, NGOs, public sector responsible, and definitely education specialists across the globe to reach out to us and see how we can get more benefits and more traction for our programs by getting also some of your end-of-life assets when you would have them available. We have a global partnership where we can collect them throughout the world and hopefully build much more digitrucks and innovative solutions using tech for education purposes. Thank you so much for your attention, and looking forward also to our panel discussion in a minute.
I would like to thank the Digitruck for bringing the computer services here. I've accepted everything. I've learned a lot about computer. Now, from now on, I would like to learn more about computer so that in future I will show all the people with disability, they can also come and join us here, the second round.
Thank you, Olivier. That was great. So great to see this impact, and this is a beautiful initiative. Thank you very much. We'll speak in a minute in the panel. But before we do, it's my honor to introduce you to Ms. Janice Richardson. Ms. Richardson is the founder of Insight and will talk to us about innovation in education. Welcome, Janice. I think you might be on mute.
Can you see my screen now?
We can see your screen, but we can't see your presentation. There we go. Perfect.
There we go. So I wanted to begin, first of all, by saying what is Insight. We're a network of experts working to help young people improve their digital literacy and to protect their rights online and offline. I've been working for some time now on a very innovative project called the Smart Bus. Why is this innovative? Well, for me, innovation has 5 features. First, student-centered. We have to base ourselves on the students' needs, students' interests. Secondly, it needs to be meaningful. How are we going to teach kids about technology if they don't actually take these tools in their hand, in their classroom, and see how they can learn with them? Thirdly, learning must be engaging. It must be motivating and memorable. We need to add a touch of magic so that when a child needs to access that learning, they easily can. And the Smart Bus really caters to this need because the content is presented by a magician, opening new opportunities. We can't do the same old thing with technology. We need to show young people how they can access culture, how they can access the exciting things online, because as you'll see later, they pretty much stick to the same things, the same platforms. Finally, self-evaluation and advocacy. We in education know that if a child can't evaluate their learning and advocate what they've learned to other people, then they haven't integrated the learning. And this concerns providing the right follow-up materials too. Feedback for us is very important, and teachers have told us that the Smart Bus is opening their eyes to new opportunities. It's letting them see their students using technology in another way. What is innovation in education? What are the obstacles that are really blocking innovation? Well, first of all, the pedagogical paradigms. Teachers and pupils see learning differently and need to work together so that they choose the paradigms which suit the situation and which prepare children for the future, because finally education is the passport to the future. School equipment infrastructure also is considerably slowing down innovation in education. Firstly, because 18 children share one computer in primary schools on average in the European Union, and these are the figures from 2019. 60% of children are taught by teachers who actually have to pay for their own personal development opportunities. We don't have good practice models. We need to provide platforms, better platforms, where teachers can share ideas and experiences. And lastly, we need to break down those walls of the classroom, open up education to the world. And this is what we've seen with the COVID experience. Children are learning by many, many other resources, and these resources need to be taken on board in schools. Here we see the study from the European Union in 2019. I've briefly gone through most of these points, but when you look at parent experience with children's digital technology use, we can really understand why we were unable to leapfrog into remote learning during the COVID crisis. 1 in 2 students don't talk to their parents about risks online and opportunities, I could add. And the same amount, 50% of young people don't think that their parents know enough about their computer use. Let's look at what we have discovered from the remote learning experience during the pandemic. How did you learn? Well, 80% of young people learned via YouTube. More than 50% Wikipedia. How many actually used the school programs that were provided for them? Only around 30%, and I think this echoes what a lot of the earlier speakers said also. Who did you learn with? We had this misconception that kids were learning with their parents. In fact, they were learning with brothers and sisters. They were working with friends or a mixture of both. Instruction from school was only around 35%. So we see that we've a lot to learn if we have to have another lockdown and learn remotely. Innovation. Before we began the Smart Bus experience, we worked with 150 children to learn about what they're doing, what they would like to learn about, and how generally they're using technology. And we see that, in fact, it's a communication tool and not much more. Very few are creating their own content. Very few are using it as a tool to learn new things, to read articles, etc. This is where the innovation is needed. We also asked them what they knew and what they didn't know about using technology, and we're really amazed to find, for example, that only 40% know how to check the credibility of online information. A good 70% don't know and would like to learn about this. Even creating a strong password was a new science for many young people. At the Council of Europe, we have developed a model where we try to look at all of the domains where a child could be using technology. And we've broken this down into 10 domains: being online, access, inclusion, as we learned earlier, well-being online, and rights online. We've also developed a certain number of tools for schools and for parents about helping their children become digital citizens. Developing education, innovation in education, all of this is about multi-stakeholders. They have to learn to work together. But where do they begin? Well, of course, the child begins learning in the family. Families need to be informed. They need the knowledge to help their children use technology wisely, to help their children learn. They need awareness of what is out there, that wealth of resources that they can tap into. They need to know about the tools. As the child reaches 3, 4 years old, they go to school. And there it's up to the schools to be providing an infrastructure which allows every young child to use technology in learning, because in fact, that's where the future is. Pedagogy, strategy, resources, these elements are up to the school, but they can't do this without the private sector, the public sector also, because this is where we have the technological expertise. But one thing that's not happening at the moment is the partnership between these three sectors, I would say. We are not piloting tools before we get teachers to use them, before we give them out to families. And this for me is important when we talk about innovation. The Council of Europe is also working on guidelines for a multi-stakeholder approach. And the objectives are, as I've said, to raise awareness of the tools, platforms, but also the challenges and the solutions. It is important to optimize fast, secure, reliable internet access for everyone, to match classroom learning to what children are going to need to tackle all of the challenges we're encountering with AI, with machine learning, etc. They need to be active participators in society. We need to open more opportunities so that they can actually learn in virtual environments. And lastly, we need to build those competences which will make for resilient citizens. But these competences can only be based on values, skills, attitudes, and knowledge and critical understanding. And only too often do we focus on skills and knowledge alone. We've been talking about education all morning, but it is really important to hear the viewpoint of a young person when we're speaking about education. It's the way they're learning, it's their future. So let's go over to Philippine, who actually lived the remote learning experience from France. Philippine's 15 years old and is also a member of the European Council for Digital Good. Over to you, Philippine.
Good morning, Philippine. I know that you've been doing remote schooling for the past month. In fact, you're not back at school yet. What's your experience been like?
Hello, Janice. Well, it's been very weird not being at school. My schedule has completely changed. I wake up later, I don't study as much, I don't have the same classes, but it's really interesting to have gone through this because I've learned a different way of studying that I would have never learned how to do otherwise.
If you could give advice to your teachers on how they should upgrade their knowledge, their tools, and maybe also to companies how they could help, what would that advice be?
I think, teachers should try to give their students questions from the textbook so it's more interactive so they can answer them. And then I think the companies should maybe try to make a website that's all in, that has everything, just to make it easier for the teachers to use, but also for the students.
I know that you use technology a lot, and we know that remote schooling is going to be around for some time. Imagine the ideal school system.
I actually quite like online learning, so probably online learning. But like I said before, with a website that has everything included, so that I don't have to worry about using 5 different websites or getting my emails lost. I think that it would be a website where there's everything. My homework, my textbooks, my online lessons.
So what do you think are the necessary tools for a student to successfully carry on remote learning?
I think that it would be very good if schools gave tablets to the younger children, maybe middle school and primary school, because especially when they're younger, most times parents don't give them an iPad or a phone to use, so I think that'd be a good idea for the younger ones. But I think for the older students, like teenagers, it would be very good to have laptops that the schools would give for a year. If coronavirus ever happens again, everyone will be prepared and have the proper tools.
Thank you, Janice. Very interesting and a beautiful story at the end. That takes us to the final panel of today's webinar. We are joined by 4 guests. You've already heard from Olivier van den Einde and Janice Richardson. They are joined by Mr. Andrew Dunnett, Director of the Vodafone Foundation, among other things, and Ms. Nicola Harris, CEO of the Click Foundation. We're going to do this in the same spirit as the previous panel. No slides, just questions and conversation. First, I'd like to start with Mr. Andrew Dunnett. Andrew, the Vodafone Foundation has done some amazing work to utilize connectivity to improve learning and education for communities in both developing and developed countries. Could you perhaps share some insights into your view on the role of connectivity as part of the learning life cycle?
Well, thanks, Ivo, and it's great to be with you all, and really interesting listening to Janice and Olivier and the points that they were sharing, and there's a lot of similarity in what we're learning as well. Connectivity, I mean, you know, I suppose for us, people who have limited access to the written word, when they get connected, they have access to everything that's ever been written. And that is the extraordinary transformation, particularly Vodafone has seen in its sub-Saharan African markets. So, I mean, we've all been to schools where there's very limited printed word, and people are learning by rote from the teacher at the front. You then bring connectivity, and you have a completely different learning experience. And so we've been doing that, particularly with UNHCR, really targeting the 8 million refugees and displaced people in Vodafone markets. That's where we really began the work. And we're currently working in 30 schools, about 86,000 children and young people who are learning regularly. And we're targeting 500,000 with UNHCR by 2025. What do we do? Well, we bring connectivity, we bring content, we bring hardware, we bring management. So we employ people from the camps or the communities to run the program, obviously supporting the teachers and the educational institutions. So that's sort of really where we've really focused a lot of our aim. I suppose the second thing on the power of connectivity, you know, is zero rating connectivity. So we've got 1.5 million learners in the Vodacom markets who are learning free online 24/7 with the eSchool. Vodacom eSchool, and that's been really, we've seen a significant uplift in numbers, obviously, in the last couple of months. What are the challenges? I think I was really interested in Janice's slide about YouTube and Wikipedia. I thought that really summed up some of the challenges that young people, wherever in the world, are as intolerant as they are in my own community about finding what they need with about 2 clicks. You know what I mean? You can put all the content in the world up online for them, but actually it's about finding exactly what they want in the shortest time distance. That's something we've learned. So there's no shortage of content, but getting the right content to the right learner, you know, immediately is absolutely key. I think the challenge for us as well is, you know, how much do you focus on the teacher and how much do you focus on the pupil? Again, Janice, who met, you know, how teachers in Europe are paying for their own hardware and equipment and learning opportunity. And so we wonder, we're working with 1,000 teachers at the moment in that instant network community, instant network school community. But again, you sometimes wonder whether you should put all the money into training the teachers and giving them the best possible ICT experience, which they can then transfer onto pupils. But then, of course, if you haven't got an ICT experience in the classroom, then, of course, that's going to be limited and so on. So that's sort of some of the stuff we're learning. But I think as we'd all agree that connectivity is going to be transformational and is transformational in the way young people are currently learning and the way all of us are learning as we go through life.
Thanks, Andrew. And how do you see the role of the private sector in all of this?
I think those of us who deal in connectivity, you know, and that's the core purpose of the company, have a very strong opportunity to be involved in this revolution, which is probably the greatest revolution that has happened in the history of humanity. I mean, in 2010, and Huawei will know this, in 2010, less than 1% of the working age population were constantly connected. Now, 80% of the working age population in the world are constantly connected. So those of us who deal in that transformation which is happening have both an opportunity and a responsibility to do something about this. So how does that work out? Well, I think it's working out in lots of different ways, because I think at the moment, no one's really sure on the roadmap of how digital and connectivity will transform learning. People are trying things in lots of different areas and ways, and and to a certain extent, it looks a little fragmented when you look at it all together. But I mean, there is commercial opportunities, there are philanthropic opportunities. We put $13 million into the partnership with UNHCR, which we're working on till 2025. There's a technical understanding and know-how, which obviously governments and educational specialists rely upon, that we bring to the table as well. So there are all sorts of things that companies who are either into hardware, into connectivity, into power, which of course is equally important when you're trying to do connected learning in remote communities. And then there's all the things that Olivia was talking about in terms of how you bring devices to the table, et cetera, et cetera. So there are many ways that companies can embrace in this space, whether they're looking at it as a commercial opportunity or a philanthropic opportunity, or a partnership with governments. There are multiple ways of doing this.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. That's brilliant. Next, I would like to move on to Ms. Nicola Harris, CEO of the Click Foundation. Nicola, I've been very impressed by how the Click Foundation is set up to improve education. Could you perhaps share how you use technology to tackle the literacy challenge in South Africa?
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me. It's an absolute privilege to speak in this platform with all these prestigious education specialists. Just a short background in terms of South Africa's context. We currently sit with about 37% unemployment, probably a lot worse over the last 3 months following the COVID-19 pandemic, and in particular about 55% youth unemployment. Couple that with the fact that international research shows that 78% of our grade 4 learners aren't learning to read for meaning in any language. And 68% of our grade 6 maths teachers don't have the desired subject knowledge. We have some very serious challenges within our education sector. In particular, also highlighted that it's estimated that only about 5 to 10% of our learners have been able to access content at home during the lockdown period. So in 2012, we set up the Click Foundation to help address some of these challenges. What we wanted to do was not only focus on basic foundational skills, but also look at how we could use technology to leapfrog and take our marginalized children into a new paradigm and to help them thrive in a digital age. Looking at language skills in particular as a strong predictor of future academic success and educational attainment, and ultimately employment and income, our first focus and our primary focus remains on foundation phase literacy. We designed a holistic technology-based intervention. We've been into many computer labs like the one shown in the presentation by Deputy Chairman Ken Hu, where we see that they're largely used as storerooms and completely underutilized. So we went in to use underutilized resources and hardware, and work with donors of hardware. So Olivia, maybe we need to talk at a later stage to bring computer labs to life in these schools. What we do is we focus on the implementation. We provide learners with logins to world-class content that allows them to go on an individualized learning journey. And we're teaching essential foundation skills, as I mentioned. Currently, we operate in about 161 schools across South Africa, and have over 100,000 active learners on the program that are engaging in content in the ordinary course on a weekly basis. Importantly, as I think many of the speakers have mentioned, it's not technology alone. It's about the coordination and the human element of bringing that technology to life. We've therefore designed a model where we employ 350 youth to help facilitate technology within the schools. And these are largely youth that have previously been unemployed. So there's a secondary beneficiary there in that we also are giving them both work experience as well as digital skills that we're training them up on, in the hope that they can also progress into better employment at a later stage. We've seen a very strong correlation in terms of progress through our program and results within schools. In the Western Cape independent testing that's done across the province, we've seen in our schools that our percentage of learning passing has increased by 66% versus the provincial average of 11%, and the average marks increased by 21% versus the provincial average increase of 4%. So when we look at this, we see the huge potential of technology that is well implemented. And we hope and we feel that we're now set up to partner with funders, government, and other players in the sector to exponentially scale this intervention. We are thrilled to partner with Huawei Tech for All and to enable our program, and we hope to reach 1 million learners by 2024. Touching on maybe one or two of the other challenges, just talking about inclusion in education that we're addressing. I think it's self-paced, so the child can go on their own learning journey. It's able to plug knowledge gaps, and in the wake of the lockdown, I think this is going to be a very, very critical role. We've been working very hard to help our parents and learners access content from home, recognizing the challenges that many of them face. We've been working with players like Vodafone in South Africa on a 0 rating. But realistically, we're going to have learners coming back into the classrooms with varying degrees of knowledge gaps. And I think technology has a great role to play in allowing each child to spend time in the areas that they require help. It's positive and encouraging. It's exciting for the kids. I think it's really, really critical that learning is fun, and technology certainly can bring an element of fun learning to these learners' lives. It also helps us address large class sizes. It's very challenging and near impossible for a teacher to give one-on-one learning experience to children in a class of 60 learners. And we have two models. The one is where the entire class goes to the lab where sufficient computers exist, and then they each get an individualized one-on-one experience at the same time. Or alternatively, where we take half the kids to the computers and allow for the teacher to have one-on-one or certainly smaller group interactions with the learners that remain in the classroom. The other thing that it's able to address is teacher absenteeism, which is a challenge at times, and where there are content knowledge gaps, it's also addressed. The other great outcome that we've seen is that the ease with which these children interact with technology has shown that even the most technophobic teacher realizes that tech is not so scary. And we have an open door for them to then also engage on learning and training with regard to technology in the classroom. So we're very passionate about using technology to create a better outcome, both in South Africa and internationally.
Great. Thank you for sharing that experience, and also great to see that obviously you've tackled a really specific problem in South Africa, but you're also, all the things that you just mentioned are super relevant for other parts of the world, right? So thank you very much. Now we move on to Olivier. Olivier, apart from having a conversation after this with Nicola Harris, you talked about the DigiTruck and your company's impact across developing countries. What do you feel is the secret, the key to realize widespread impact, and particularly in how you see the role of technology partners in this?
Yeah, good question. I think, we are, as mentioned also by some of the previous panelists, Close the Gap has historically very much focused on the devices and on the connectivity. And what I always say, it's kind of the top of the iceberg. It's without a device, definitely nothing else can happen. But the device on its own is basically also only a very marginal part of the total the total package. So I think to have a widespread impact, you need to basically tick all the boxes. And in that sense, it comes back to a kind of a public-private partnership. I see the best results in the countries where we work is really where corporate partners, like certainly the telcos and the manufacturers and the integrators, work together with ministries of education with counties and regional governments as well. Certainly, if you want to aim to work also in the remote and the off-grid areas, and also with energy providers. So, like with solar-based rural electrification bodies. So it's really a public-private partnership. I believe that's the key to success to broaden the impact.
Thanks, Olivier. That's great. Janice, you also talked about a multi-stakeholder approach and the importance of it. Could you please share your view on the role of the private sector and especially ICT technology companies in this?
Yes, I think that the technology sector really has an important role to play. First of all, I think it's up to them to provide the safe, reliable, the ethically sound platforms that young people are going to be using in school. And just a little anecdote, one of the young teachers in training that I meet quite frequently has been studying at university for a whole year now, learning to be a teacher, and has not yet even broached the subject of how you use technology in learning. This really amazes me in a country like the Netherlands, which is quite in advance on these things. Secondly, we need easily accessible quality content. And I was very pleased to hear someone mention earlier that we want quality and not a supermarket of content. And we have to work together on this, public, private, government, families. Teacher training, I've just mentioned that, it is so important. Research, we need to keep understanding, keep doing research to understand what are the needs of all learners, how do we respond to them, and how can innovation help us? And I think really there is not enough being invested in this type of research today. And lastly, piloting. If only we really piloted the tools that we're putting on the market with young learners to fully understand the benefits, the opportunities, the challenges, and the ethical issues that we need to address. They're all the points that I think we should be working on.
Great. Thank you, Janice. And what a great summary to bring us to the end of this panel and to the webinar. I really enjoyed it today. I loved listening to all of you, and I hope you all did too, wherever you are. We'd like to thank you all for tuning in and for listening, and I'd like to extend an especially warm thank you to everyone part of the panels, all of our speakers, and everyone who facilitated and made the webinar today a reality. Thank you all for your time, for sharing your expertise. For anyone who would like to know more about Tech for All, you can see some more contact details on the screen in a minute, and hopefully see you again soon. Thank you and goodbye.